Having access to empathy in the workplace is not only helpful, it's crucial. Several years ago, I interviewed a young man for an entry-level position in IT. Let's call him Sam. Sam was about, I don't know, 20, in his early 20s, maybe 5'5"-ish, slight build, and a shock of black hair. Sam was very, very shy. I couldn't get him to give me eye contact. And he spoke very quietly. I remember saying to him a couple of times, "Excuse me, Sam, I can't hear you. Can you speak up, perhaps?" And when he spoke up in yes and no answers. He didn't get the job. But what he did get was a piece of my mind, because I couldn't get him off it all day long. He just stayed there, and I'm thinking, what the heck is going on with this guy? And I think part of that was because I thought, if he continues on like that, he'll never get a job. In fact, his full-time job will be interviewing him, because nobody's going to hire him. But the real reason was because I knew I could do something. I could reach out and help this individual. And I learned a new phrase today from Robin when she spoke this morning. I had the social capital to show to this individual, so I used it. And the next morning I called him and I said, "Sam, my friend, the bad news is you didn't get the job. But the good news is, maybe for somebody, I would like to coach you." So a coaching relationship ensued between Sam and me. He would come to my office every Wednesday evening at 6 p.m. sharp. And I'm going to tell you, it wasn't easy, because this was a young man that I learned very, very early on. Confidence wasn't something that had ever been required of him. It was hard. But we forged through anyway. We role played, and we read books together, and we did book reviews. I even sent him to Toastmasters, and he went to like 3 or 4 sessions. He said to me at one time, "They made me stand up in the middle of this hall and introduce myself to all of these people." So he was really trying. So one day he came in and he was so excited, and he said to me, "Lorraine, I have this interview in Sarasota in a few days." And I was excited. And then he went on to tell me that he'd interviewed with these people twice before. And twice before, he didn't get the job. And of course, now I'm concerned. I'm wondering if the same people who interviewed him twice before are going to be the same people who interview him again. And my excitement started to turn into concern. But then I thought, well, at least he's been coached. And 3 times is a charm. He got the job. He got the job. He was excited. I was excited. And I think he may have stayed there for about 12 months, because at that time another position had come open under me, and he wanted to come and work for me, of course. So we interviewed him and he got the job, and that was 4.5 years ago. Wow. Yeah, thank you. So let's contrast that story with one that I heard not long ago, actually, just a couple of weeks ago. A very good friend of mine who is in a staffing agency. She was getting on a Zoom call to do a brainstorming session with several of her colleagues, and the CEO from this staffing agency was also going to be on the call. One of her colleagues was a lady, or a young female we'll call Sarah. And my friend had actually hired Sarah several months earlier, straight out of college. And when she described Sarah, she said Sarah was this tall, skinny, gangly redhead who exuded confidence. She was funny, she was vivacious, and she was eager to learn and more eager to please. My friend said she was like this bright light. So she was on this brainstorming session as well. So during the brainstorming session, The CEO apparently comes up with this doozy of an idea, like, psh, at which point Sarah pipes in and says, wow, Bob, that was amazing. That was brilliant. At which point Bob throws his arms, stares into the camera and says, wow, Bob, that was brilliant. That was amazing. He mocked her. He mocked her right there with all of her colleagues. Can you imagine? Can you imagine the humility that that young girl must have felt at that point? That light that my friend had seen in her several months before when she hired her straight out of college, it was as if he'd gone and blown it out. I often wonder if when people say things like that, do they realize the impact that they have on these individuals? 2021 was coined the Great Resignation. Has anybody heard of the Great Resignation? 48 million Americans just walked away from the workplace, voluntarily resigned their jobs. It was a phenomenon. We all know what instigated that move, right? We were right in the middle of a global pandemic. The world was just closing down around us, and it gave us pause to step back and ask ourselves, what the heck am I doing with my life, right? We were re-evaluating. The three of the largest consulting companies in the world, I think it was Deloitte, Ernst & Young, and McKinsey, did a slew of research on what actually caused this phenomenon. And the number one reason that kept floating to the top was work-life balance. We all get that. We all understand work-life balance. We all want it. But the number two reason, and it was a very, very close second, was employee disengagement. Lack of employee engagement in the workplace. Workers were just tired. They were fed up. They were saying things like, I feel like I'm underappreciated. I'm not valued. My boss doesn't care. The company doesn't care. I've become a means to an end. They were just tired. So 2022 brings with it a brand new buzz phrase. Has everybody heard of quiet quitting? Quiet quitting. That's our new buzz phrase for this year. It's where individuals quit, but they don't leave. They stay right there on the job and they quit. They align themselves as close as possible to the job description and do as little as possible, because the mentality is, why should I go above and beyond when the people I work for are not? So that's where we are today, right? It's at the end of the day, what we're looking at is lack of empathy, right? In a word, lack of empathy. Julie Diamond, who is a psychologist and the author of Power, a user's guide, great book, attributes a lack of empathy with misuse of power in the workplace. She talks about two powers in particular, positional power and personal power. Now, positional power is just that. The power is attached to the position. So if, for instance, you're a CEO or a judge or a doctor, a nurse, it doesn't matter. Whatever your position is, the power is attached to it. Personal power, the power is attached to you. You are personal power, and personal power is you. Wherever you go, it goes with you. So what does that mean? Well, it's your personality, your character traits. How much self-development, how much self-improvement have you done on you? How emotionally intelligent are you? How aware are you? Do you know what other people see and how they perceive you when you walk into a room, right? It's your values, your belief system. When's the last time you took your belief system out and blew the dust off it and asked if those beliefs are still working for you, right? This is all part of personal power. Personal power is also your knowledge base. So wherever you work, how knowledgeable are you in what you do? Can you speak 3 levels down to what you do if somebody were to walk over and ask you intelligently? All of these traits give us confidence, right? The more we know, the more in touch we are with ourselves. And the more confident we are, the more secure we feel. And the more secure we feel, the more compassion we can show, the more empathy we tend to exert, the more caring we become, and we're not afraid of vulnerability. I'm not taking away from positional power. Positional power is very important. I, for one, am very, very proud of my position, as I'm sure most of you are in here. We've worked hard to get to where we are today, and we ought to be proud of that. But what I am saying is positional power, think about this, positional power, having the position without having a strong grounding of personal power can be hollow at best. It can be dangerous. Having positional power and not having worked on yourself can take you into a space of command and control. Do it because I said so. Barking orders, as opposed to influence and connect and respect. Right? So personal power, think of it as the rails that you run your positional power on. Think of using your personal power as the oil in the engine that runs your position. These two powers together, if you can align them and balance them, that's a sweet spot, my friends. And if you can live in that sweet spot, it feels really, really good. So I want to ask you to indulge me for a minute. And I want you to imagine that this stage that I'm standing on is one big XY graph. Okay, an XY graph. You with me? Okay. The y-axis is right here. So imagine that we have this big y-axis running all the way up and down here. And at the very top of the y-axis, imagine it reads high positional power. And at the bottom, by my feet, it reads low positional power. Then we have this x-axis running right through the middle. And over here, to your left, it reads low personal power. And over here, to your right, high personal power. I think I've got a graph. I didn't realize that was up there. So you can see it. You can actually see what I'm pointing out over there. So I am going to step over here into this bottom left quadrant. Yeah, am I in the right quadrant here? This is where we have low personal, low positional. This is somebody who hasn't done a lot of work on themselves, and perhaps they're in the low entry-level position, the low in the pecking order. This is where Sam was several years ago when he walked into my office. This is perhaps where Sarah was several weeks ago when she was on that call. And it's our responsibility, it's our job to get our people from this bottom lower quadrant up and over to this top quadrant. That's up to us, right? Where we have high position, high personal. I don't know where Sarah is right now, but if she's still working for that CEO, I could take a guess that she's perhaps in one of 3 places. Maybe she has joined the Great Resignation. Maybe she's quietly quit. Or if she's taken the same journey he took, maybe she's gone this way and she's in this top left quadrant. This quadrant where the insecure sit, where those who don't have a lot of confidence sit. The quadrant where we see aggression. Bullies sit up there, and bad bosses. We don't leave bad jobs. We leave bad bosses. But I'm happy to inform you that Sam made it from this quadrant, and he took this journey, and he is now over in this top right quadrant. He's doing extremely well. In 4 years, he has received 2 promotions and almost doubled his salary. He's doing rather well. I would like to ask all of you to imagine if we invested the empathy in our leaders of tomorrow through mentoring and through nurturing, what our workplace of today might look like. Thank you.